Today, we're digging into a truly chilling story about how a single, tiny, almost unnoticeable mistake in language led to an absolute catastrophe. It's a powerful look at how one missing letter can have fatal consequences. It sounds impossible, right? But on April 25th, 1980, that question got a tragically real answer. And it's a stark reminder that when the stakes are this high, the tiniest details in how we communicate, well, they carry an unbelievable weight.
And this was the cost. 146 people, an entire plane load of British tourists on a Dan Air Boeing 727, lost when the plane flew straight into a mountainside on the island of Tenerife. Every single person on board.
See, this wasn't a case of a broken engine or some freak storm. The story of Dan Air 1008 is all about a breakdown in communication. It's about how a simple grammatical error could lead a perfectly experienced flight crew into a deadly trap. Okay, so to really get what happened, you first have to understand the setting. Tenerife North Airport, also known as Los Rodeos. This place, it had a reputation, and not a good one. I mean, this airport was notoriously difficult. Just 3 years earlier, it was the site of the single deadliest crash in aviation history. And on this particular day, you had dense fog hiding the mountains, you had no airport radar, and the crew was being sent to a runway the captain had never, ever used before. The stage was absolutely set for a high-pressure situation with zero room for error. And that's when the confusion really started to build. Flight 1008 was catching up to a slower plane ahead of it, so air traffic control had to do something to create some space between them. They had to improvise. Now, think about this, because this runway was so rarely used, there weren't any official pre-planned holding patterns on the charts. So the controller basically had to make one up right there in the moment, and then try to communicate it clearly over the radio.
And right here, this is the moment everything changes. The controller's instruction included the phrase, "Turn to the left." Seems simple, right? A basic direction. But in this context, it was dangerously ambiguous.
And this slide just lays it bare. That one little S makes all the difference. What the controller meant to say was turns to the left, as in he was describing the shape of the holding pattern, like a racetrack. But what the crew heard was turn to the left, a direct, immediate command. It's like getting two completely different sets of directions from one sentence. That missing S sent the crew down a totally different path. Instead of flying into a safe holding pattern out over the ocean, they took that command literally and made an immediate left turn, right toward a mountain hidden in the clouds. All right, so let's put ourselves in the cockpit now. The crew is trying to follow this bizarre instruction, and you can just feel their confusion starting to mount.
You know, the crew knew something was weird. The first officer says it right there. This holding pattern felt strange. It didn't make any sense for the runway they were supposed to be landing on. But, and this is so crucial, they didn't question it. They didn't ask for clarification. They just tried to comply with what they thought was an order.
And that clearance? It was absolutely catastrophic. See, the controller had no idea where the plane actually was. No radar, remember? So he gives them an altitude that would have been perfectly safe in the correct pattern, but for where they actually were, heading towards the mountains, it was a death sentence. The minimum safe altitude in that area was 14,500 feet. And then, with just moments to spare, you get this dawning horror from the captain. That word from the original transmission, inbound. It finally clicks. They were heading outbound, away from the airport. The instruction made no sense at all, but that realization came way, way too late. Suddenly, the ground proximity warning system explodes to life. That is the one sound a pilot prays they will never, ever hear. And the crew's reaction in these next few chaotic seconds, born from that complete disorientation, well, it sealed their fate. And the most tragic part of this whole thing? The captain's desperate attempt to save his plane was the very thing that doomed it. Believing the mountain was to his left, he yanked the plane into a hard right turn to get away. But that turn pointed them right at the peak. As they flew over a small dip, the alarm went quiet for a few seconds, giving them a terrifying false sense of hope. The awful irony is if they had just pulled up and climbed straight ahead, they would have cleared it. So, after the crash, the investigation began, and almost poetically, it turned into its own battle of words, mirroring the very communication breakdown that caused the disaster in the first place. Okay, so you have Spain and the UK working together on this, but when their reports came out, it was clear they had two totally different takes on who was ultimately responsible. On one side, you have the official Spanish report, which put the blame squarely on the captain. They said he flew into high terrain and didn't follow the minimum safe altitudes on his chart. But then you have this critical addendum from the British investigators. They argued, no, wait a minute, the controller's confusing instruction and this improvised, unflyable holding pattern were the real root causes that set the crew up for failure.
But, while both sides were debating blame, they were kind of missing the forest for the trees. This wasn't really about one single person's mistake.
Because look, this wasn't just about one pilot's error or one controller slip of the tongue. This was about an entire system that had no safety nets, a system so brittle that one missing letter could bring the whole thing crashing down.
I mean, think about the recipe for disaster brewing here. You've got no radar, so the controller is essentially blind. You've got an untested, improvised procedure that was a huge gamble. And then you throw in that one tiny, ambiguous piece of language. It was the spark that lit the whole fuse. There was just no margin for error that day.
So what's the big takeaway from the story of Flight 1008? It's that safety can't just rely on hoping everyone is perfect all the time. Your systems have to be built to catch human error, not to be shattered by it. And it shows that precision in language, that's not a luxury. In a cockpit, it's a lifeline.
It's a question that just hangs there over the fog-covered slopes of Tenerife, a haunting reminder of 146 lives, all lost to a single, deadly misunderstanding.